Located a little over 700 miles apart are a pair of sister parks on the east coast of the US. Busch Gardens has locations in both Williamsburg, Virginia and Tampa, Florida. While one is themed to Europe and the other to Africa, they have received some extremely similar rides in the past. So let's match them up and see which has the better coaster lineup. Before we jump in, I'm going to be pairing off these coasters one by one and picking a winner, or draw, point for point. Let's start with Grover's Alpine Express versus Air Grover. Now, the kiddie coasters are exact clones and opened a year apart, so without any real need for an in-depth look, it's a draw here, half point for each side. Loch Ness Monster versus Scorpion. Next up is a pair of vintage looping coasters. Loch Ness opened in 1978, 2 years before Scorpion. Now the ride experiences themselves are very different, with Arrow designing Loch Ness to run through the terrain and includes a pair of interlocking loops and 2 lift hills to help the ride through its 3,200 feet of track. Now while the ride has certainly become more and more rough over the years, the 114-foot drop is nothing to scoff at. For this ride, it's actually 44 years old. Now, Scorpion is a much smaller scale ride, built by Schwarzkopf, standing at about 60 feet and traveling over only about 1,800 feet of track. Riders experience a very forceful loop and a set of turns. Now, it sits on a very flat plot of land, and it's about as simple as they come. While it's a bit more unique in terms of trying to find the ride model and manufacturer, the real decision here comes down to the forceful nature of the one loop versus the length and terrain style of Loch Ness. This point goes to Williamsburg. Tempesto versus Tigris. Now, these two Skyrocket 2 clones both feature comfort collars, and in my experience, these don't really vary much model to model. This is another draw, half point to each side. Verbolten versus Crocus Curse. Now we have a pair of borderline family to thrill coasters. Verbolten is a rare, large-scale zero launch coaster that takes riders through a visually impressive indoor ride section before climbing out over the river and diving through its iconic Big Bad Wolf drop. Now the ride itself has some good theming and a decent layout and a cool drop track. It's a surprising hit every time I attend the park. Now, Crocus Curse is an extremely well done mock spinner. It features both a forwards and backwards sections as well as spinning portions of the track, and a very impressive elevator lift. Now, after the lift, the riders ride on the track that actually tilts towards a massive cobra statue. Now, overall, this ride is beautiful, but probably a bit more mild than Verbolten, but it's certainly not without its more fun moments. Now, these two are very close because of how well done Crocus Curse is for what it is. I think Verbolten could have been executed a little bit better with maybe a little bit of a longer layout, but the theming is still good, and the more thrilling elements led me to pick Verbolten here. Point Williamsburg. Invader versus Cheetah Hunt. This is probably the oddest pairing in the video, but these models are both more mild versions of usually more extreme rides. Invader is basically the half size of other GCIs, and Cheetah Hunt was the follow-up to Maverick but didn't quite hit to that extreme level. Now, Invader is an underrated ride in my opinion. It may be small in height and length, only measuring at 74 feet for the drop and 2,100 feet for the length, but the ride is designed really well. It's got plenty of pops of fun airtime and other forces. A fun fact here is the trains are actually reused from the original Gwazi in Tampa. Now, Cheetah Hunt, on the other hand, is certainly a full-scale model, with over 4,400 feet of track, 3 launches, and a max drop of 130 feet. The stats lean towards that being a legit thrill coaster. However, the main opinion of this ride, it's definitely more mild than that. The single inversion really lacks the true extreme forces throughout, and it's a bit disappointing for those who are hoping for a Maverick-level ride. Now, while Invader may be the better paced ride here, Cheetah Hunt has a superior setting, uses tunnels, inversion, and a launch, so point goes to Tampa. Griffin versus Chiara. The battle of another pair of sister coasters. Built 2 years apart, the two are very similar. Both are dive models, with Griffin being 2 years newer and having a 5-foot advantage on height. While Chiara is the longer ride by about 80 feet and probably has better theming in the area, Griffin features a second inversion and a near identical layout. Point Williamsburg. Alpengeist versus Montu. Inverted coasters clash here with very different styles, unlike the dive matchup. Now, Alpengeist is the younger sibling of the two, opening a year after Montu in 1997. It features a massive 189-foot height, 170-foot drop, and 6 inversions over 3,800 plus feet of track. Now, Montu sits at 150 feet tall with a 128-foot drop and features 7 inversions over nearly 4,000 feet of track. Now the Williamsburg invert is known for that really intense first half and the drop that just seems to go on forever, but it has a lull after that mid-course. Now Montu is the more renowned ride, and the use of tunnels throughout the ride, it's just as intense as its sibling. Now Alpengeist does use the wooden terrain very well, but it doesn't give quite the same feel as ripping through those tunnels. Now, the real deciding factor here comes down to the pair of double inversions. While the Cobra roll found on Alpengeist looks amazing and it's really snappy, it's far from the most comfortable inversion, while the Batwing on Montu is much more rare and much more satisfying to go through. Point Tampa. Apollo's Chariot versus Kumba. Another odd matchup, the 90s B&M face-off next. Now Kumba opened in 1993 and has been thrilling riders with a very intense layout that features 7 inversions. It's often cited as one of the more intense B&Ms around. Now the sit-down coaster has that iconic loop around the lift hill and interlocking corkscrews through the trenches. Up in Virginia, Apollo's Chariot couldn't be more different. The original hyper model for the company, it has a long layout that's filled with mostly floater airtime that supplies some fun pops here and there. Now the only real intense moments here come around on that helix by the midpoint of the ride. That being said, it's still a great ride even if it isn't an elite hyper. It comes down to an intense looper and a below average hyper, and when it comes to B&M, I gotta take the hyper coaster here. Point to Williamsburg. Now before the final fight, we have to take into account the extra ride at Tampa, the Mock Wild Mouse Sand Serpent. Now the ride actually used to be at Williamsburg but was relocated, so for the small and unimpressive ride, let's give Tampa an extra half a point. Pantheon versus Iron Gwazi. Now this is the big one, the pair of new for 2022 headliners that both reshape their park's lineup as a whole. Now this is a two-pointer for sure. Starting up north, Pantheon is an impressive, intimate multi-launch coaster that's aimed around strong airtime moments, a shuttle launch, and an awesome top hat. Now the 95-degree drop off that 170-foot top hat should be filled with plenty of ejector airtime. Throw in a big outer bank hill and 2 inversions and you have a pretty complete ride. It may be a bit short, but it's easily the best looking in the park. Iron Gwazi is an RMC hybrid conversion of the former twin wooden coaster Gwazi. Now the hypercoaster tops 200 feet, 4,000 feet of track, and also features 2 inversions. Flush with its own off-axis ejector airtime, this ride is a monster. Early reviews are in and it seems to be crowned as a true rival to Steel Vengeance as for the best ride in the country. Now the downward barrel drop and the outer bank hill seem to be some real highlights. Now Pantheon is going to be the king in Williamsburg and looks to be a real A-class ride that could easily break my top 10. But even so, Iron Gwazi is without a doubt a bigger and badder ride. It really isn't fair when RMC gets to put a full hyper-sized layout because they just tend to outdo almost any other coaster in any other company. So that leaves the final scores 5.5 to 5, with Tampa defeating Williamsburg. While Tampa may have a few more basic rides in the bottom, the park is very split from top to bottom with Williamsburg. Now, Iron Gwazi is definitely the trump card here though. If it wasn't just coasters, I think Virginia probably pulls this out, but for now, Tampa takes the crown. Let me know what parks you'd like to see me battle it out next time. And that's all from this week from the shores of Island Coasters.